let us start our today's topic. Our today's topic is some infectious disease. We'll classify these infectious diseases into following types according to the cause to agent of the infection. We classify them into bacterial diseases, viral diseases, protozoan diseases, helminth diseases, and fungal diseases. So we classify these infectious diseases on the basis of their cause to agent into following types. So some diseases are caused by bacteria. They are known as bacterial disease. Some are caused by viruses. They are known as viral disease. Some are caused by protozoans. Some are caused by helminth parasites, and some are caused by fungi. So which diseases we have to discuss among them? We have to discuss one bacterial disease, that is typhoid. We have to discuss a viral disease, some viral diseases. For example, AIDS. We have to discuss hepatitis B. We have to discuss AIDS, hepatitis B, common cold. Common cold. Among protozoan diseases, we have to discuss amoebiasis. Among helminth parasite diseases, we have to discuss ascariasis and filariasis. And among fungal diseases, we have to discuss the ringworm infection. The ringworm infection. So we have to discuss these diseases one by one. So we have classified diseases on the basis of their cause to agent. So some are caused by bacteria, some are caused by viruses, protozoans, helminths, and fungi. So the bacterial disease which we are going to discuss is typhoid. Then we are going to discuss AIDS, hepatitis B, and common cold, viral disease. Among protozoan diseases, we are supposed to discuss amoebiasis. Among helminth parasite diseases, we are supposed to discuss ascariasis and filariasis. And among fungal diseases, we are going to discuss ringworm infection. So let us start the bacterial disease, typhoid. We will start with the bacterial disease, typhoid. This typhoid is also known as enteric fever. Enteric fever. It affects the intestines. That is why it is also known as enteric fever. So first of all, we have to look at the causative agent of this typhoid. Causative agent. What causes this typhoid? Typhoid is caused by a bacterium known as Salmonella typhi. It is caused by a bacterium known as Salmonella typhi. Now we have to look its mode of infection, how it infects a person. How does it enter into the body of a person? Mode of infection. Its mode of infection is direct and oral. Direct and oral. Or we say it has got fecal-oral route. Fecal-oral route. That means this parasite, this bacterium, it enters into our body through contaminated food and water. Through contaminated food and water. Food and water. So the bacterium is present in infected food and water. So when we take this food and water, we take it through mouth. So it directly enters into our body through mouth along with contaminated food and water. So we say its mode of infection is direct and oral. Or we say it has got fecal-oral route. The bacteria are passed outside through the fecal matter of the infected person. When this fecal matter dries up, flies they carry these bacterium onto our food particles, food substances. If the flies sit on our food substances, if the cockroaches sit on our food substances, they carry the bacterium to our food. If the fecal matter goes into water, then bacterium are passed into water. And if we drink that contaminated water, having bacteria in it, then we may get infected, right? So fecal-oral route means it leaves the body through fecal matter. And if those bacteria which were present in the fecal matter, if they are deposited on our food substances or if they get deposited in our water, then we take them along with water directly through mouth. So it has got direct and oral route, or we call it as a fecal-oral route, right? So they enter into our body through contaminated food and water. Then incubation period. Incubation period. Incubation period is the time since the entry of pathogen into our body and the manifestation of the first symptoms. So when the parasite enters into our body, starting from that point of time, till it presents the first symptoms, this period from the entry of pathogen till it manifests the first symptoms of the disease, that period is known as incubation period. The incubation period for typhoid is 1 to 3 weeks. So if a person gets infected today, after 1 to 3 weeks, he may develop the symptoms of typhoid, right? So this period is known as incubation period, right? Then we will see what are the symptoms of this typhoid or enteric fever. Symptoms. Symptoms of the typhoid. The first symptom in case of typhoid is headache. A person suffers from continuous headache. This headache is not specific, but this after this headache, the person develops classical typhoid fever. The person suffers from classical typhoid fever. What is this classical typhoid fever? In this classical typhoid fever, in the first week, a person suffers from fever, and in first week, fever spikes or rises. Afternoon, in the morning, the person's body temperature is normal, but afternoon, the fever starts to rise and increases with each passing day. With each passing day. So in the first week, the person is suffering from fever, but this fever shows a characteristic pattern. It rises afternoon and increases day by day, and goes on increasing with each passing day. Then in the second week, there is constant high body temperature, constant high fever, 103 to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The person suffers from constant high fever, 103 to 104 Fahrenheit. Person suffers from constant high fever, 103 to 104 Fahrenheit. And in the second week, rose red rash may develop on chest and upper abdomen. Upper abdomen. In the second week, there is constant high fever, 103 to 104 degree Fahrenheit, and there is rose red rash, which develops on chest and upper abdomen. Then in the third and fourth week, third and fourth week, fever slowly subsides. Then fever declines slowly in the third and fourth week. In addition to this classical typhoid fever, the person may also suffer from delirium. Delirium. That means the person suffers from mental confusion. The person suffers from mental confusion. He is not able to think properly. He gets confused. He gets irritated. So this is another symptom of the typhoid. A person may suffer from delirium. A person may suffer from diarrhea or constipation. A person may suffer from diarrhea or constipation in this typhoid fever, in this typhoid infection, right? The person may also experience distension of lower right quadrant of abdomen. A person may also suffer from distension of lower right quadrant of abdomen. The abdomen becomes swollen, particularly in the lower right quadrant, right? Sometimes this is taken as a state of emergency by doctors and the person may be operated upon, right? So this distension of lower quadrant of abdomen, this is one of the symptoms of typhoid, right? In addition to this, person suffers damage to his intestines. These bacteria, they cause lesions of intestinal mucosa. Lesions of intestinal mucosa. Lesions of intestinal mucosa. So they erode the intestinal mucosa by their enzymes, right? And this causes hemorrhage. This causes hemorrhage. And the person may experience blood in his stools. This may cause hemorrhage, and the person may experience blood in stools. In advanced cases of this typhoid, a person suffers from perforations of intestines, which may lead to death. If not treated, right? So a person may suffer from perforations of the intestine as well because of the enzymes of the bacteria, right? So intestine gets perforated, and bleeding occurs, and that blood may pass in the stool, right? So these are some symptoms of the typhoid. So the typhoid is characterized by headache. It is characterized by classical typhoid fever. In classical typhoid fever, the fever arises afternoon in the first week and keeps increasing day by day. In the second week, there is constant high fever of 103 to 104 degree Fahrenheit. And in the second week, a person may develop rose red rash on the chest and upper abdomen, right? So this appearance of rose red rash on the chest and upper abdomen, this is one of the indications of the typhoid. But this does not develop in every person, right? So this is not a specific feature. In the third week and fourth week of the infection, the fever slowly declines and the body temperature may return to normal. In this course of time, a person may also suffer from delirium. The person gets confused. A person may suffer from diarrhea or constipation. Mostly constipation occurs, but sometimes diarrhea may also occur. A person experiences distension of the lower quadrant of abdomen, the lower part of right side of the abdomen. It becomes swollen, and sometimes doctors they take it as appendicitis, and they go for the surgery unnecessarily. Right? These bacteria they cause damage to the intestines of the person. The bacterial enzymes they erode the intestinal mucosa, causing lesions of the intestine. And through those, by that erosion of the intestinal mucosa, blood vessels also rupture, leading to hemorrhage. And if the process continues, then the intestine it may get perforated. Then the intestine may get perforated, and this perforation of the intestine, it is the main cause of the death in case of typhoid. So this happens only when the patient remains untreated. If the patient is treated well in time, then the person may not die. The person can be saved, right? But some persons they do not develop at all any symptom. So some of the persons may remain asymptomatic for this typhoid. One such case was observed very early in USA. There was a lady who is commonly known as Typhoid Mary. She was the first known case of asymptomatic typhoid patient. So these symptoms may develop to some extent in most of the people, but all the symptoms may not be present in a single person. And even some persons they may remain totally asymptomatic, although they have got typhoid infection, but they do not develop the symptoms. One such case is known as Typhoid Mary. Typhoid Mary. The actual name of this Typhoid Mary was Mary Malone. Mary Malone was an Irish lady. She was an Irish lady. She served as a cook in USA. And it was reported that she had infected 51 individuals, out of which three persons, they died. So how it was disclosed that Mary Malone is an asymptomatic carrier for typhoid? Since she was working as a cook in different families of USA. When she served as a cook in the first family, they got typhoid. They suffered from typhoid. Then she left the job there and served in another family. There also typhoid spread. Similarly, she worked then in another family. They also got the typhoid. When her case history was studied, then it was observed that this typhoid Mary, it spreads typhoid to the family where she serves as a cook. Then she was tested, and it was found that she is a asymptomatic carrier for typhoid. Then this Mary Malone was kept in isolation, where she died then, right? So she died in isolation, and she was the first known case of asymptomatic carrier of typhoid, right? So some of the persons they may remain asymptomatic for typhoid. So that is how this typhoid spreads. Now, what is the prophylaxis? How we can prevent? How we can save ourselves from this typhoid? Prevention is always better than cure. So how we can save ourselves? How we can prevent the spread of this typhoid? Prophylaxis. Prophylaxis means prevention. So prevention is always better than cure. So how can we prevent ourselves from getting typhoid? So for preventing the spread of typhoid, one must cover proper covering of eatable. Covering of eatable. all the eatables, they should be properly covered because these bacteria, they are passed in the stools. The flies and the cockroaches, they pass over the stools, they sit on the stools, and they may contact the bacterium. And if these flies and cockroaches, if they sit on our food items, if they walk over the food items, they may transfer the bacterium from those stools to our eatables, and we may get infected. So all the eatables, they should be properly covered so that flies and cockroaches, they act as vectors. They carry the pathogen from stools to the eatables, right? So all the eatables should be properly covered so that flies and cockroaches do not sit over it. So they do not deposit the bacterium on our eatable, right? Screening of screening of food and water sources. So we should monitor where from we are getting our food. Is this food prepared in hygienic manner? Where from we are getting our water? Is this water safe for drinking? So we should screen our food sources and water sources. We should get it clear whether our drinking water is safe for drinking or not. We should check it that human stools are not introduced into our drinking water. In previous days, in old times, we used to fetch water from the streams, and in old times there were open type latrines. Most of the latrines were made on the banks of the streams, so that this fecal matter, it was directly passed into the flowing water, and down the hill or down the stream, people used to take this water for drinking purpose, and there were outbreaks. Most of the outbreaks were in the olden days because of this practice, right? Similarly, we should screen our food sources. The persons who are making our food, whether they maintain a clean hygiene, whether they are safe from this typhoid. So we should screen our food and water sources. A person should maintain good personal hygiene. Good personal hygiene. A person should maintain a good personal hygiene. So a person must be always neat and clean. The nails should be trimmed regularly because most of these infectious agents, they remain in our nails. When we are performing work, when we are doing some work, some foreign materials, they get deposited beneath our nails, tips of the nails, right? So if we clip the nails, if we trim the nails regularly, so that our hands, when we wash our hands, this foreign material, these foreign particles, they are also washed off. They do not remain under the nail, right? When we visit toilet, after visiting toilet, we should wash our hands thoroughly with soap because these bacteria, they are passed along the stools, and after passing out the stools, when we go for the ablution, then after ablution we should thoroughly wash our hands with soap so that these bacteria are not spread from one person to another person. Proper disposal of human excreta. Proper disposal of human excreta. It is very much essential because most of the bacteria, they pass into our food substances or water through human excreta. So that open type system of latrines, that should be strictly abandoned. That should be avoided. Human excreta, it must be properly disposed of. Either it should be buried underground or it should be kept in the trenches so that flies and cockroaches, they do not have access to it, right? So if anywhere there are open type these toilets in villages or countryside areas, right? So those open type toilets or latrines, they should be immediately dismantled. People should be made aware about the harmful effects of those open type toilets. People should be encouraged for making underground trenches for the toilets so that these flies and cockroaches, they do not come in contact with the excreta. In most of the towns, people build their toilets on the drains. When they flush their toilets, that excreta passes in the drains, and that remains in the drains for several days. And flies, they sit on that excreta, and they transfer the bacteria from that excreta to our eatables. So we should avoid consuming roadside junk food. We mostly consume those fried potatoes, fried fish, fried peas on the roads, which are sold on the roadside. They are kept in open. When the passing vehicles uh, blow the dust, that dust falls on those food items. In that dust, there may be the bacteria. When we consume such foods, these bacteria directly enter into our body, and they cause immediately vomiting and diarrhea, and they may also cause typhoid, right? So this human excreta, it should be properly disposed of. Then a person must also go for vaccination. Vaccines are available for this typhoid. There is a vaccine known as TAB vaccine. TAB vaccine. It is TAB stands for typhoid A and B. Typhoid A and B. There are two types of typhoid: typhoid A and typhoid B. Typhoid A is caused by Salmonella typhi, and typhoid B is caused by Salmonella paratyphi. Right. So for both the types of typhoid, we have got a combined vaccine known as TAB vaccine. Right. So a person must be vaccinated by this TAB vaccine, or the person can go for typhoid vaccine. Typhoid vaccine. So if the people are vaccinated, then they are not likely to get this typhoid. So these are the preventions for contacting this typhoid. So prevention is always better than cure. So if you want to save yourself from the typhoid attack, then you should properly cover your eatables. You should monitor where from your food is coming. Is it coming from a hygienic source or unhygienic source? Where from your water is coming? Is this fit for drinking or not? So screening of food and water sources is essential. Maintaining good personal hygiene is very much essential. Before eating the meals, one must thoroughly wash his or her hands with soap. So hands should be thoroughly washed with soap before taking meals. When a person goes to the toilet, after before leaving the toilet, a person must thoroughly wash hands so that the bacteria do not stick on the hands. There should be proper disposal of human excreta. Human excreta should not be left in open. It should be not left in open, right? So this human excreta, it should be properly disposed of. Either it should be buried in the soil, or the human excreta must be kept in trenches which are closed from the top, so that houseflies and cockroaches do not have access to it. Because these bacteria are mostly spread by the vectors, flies and cockroaches, which sit on our food items carrying the bacteria, right? And a person must get vaccinated for this, against this typhoid. There is a vaccine available. There is a vaccine available known as TAB vaccine. TAB stands for typhoid A and B. And there is another vaccine available that is known as typhoid vaccine. So if a person is vaccinated by TAB vaccine or typhoid vaccine, he is not likely to contract this typhoid. So these were the prophylaxis, prevention of the typhoid. Then, is this typhoid curable? Yes, this typhoid is curable. How a person can be diagnosed for typhoid? So there is a test known as Vidal test. If a person is suffering from fever, if he is suffering from abdominal pain, if he is suffering from mental confusion, if the fever is not subsiding, the person should go for a test for typhoid. That is known as Vidal test. This Vidal test, it shows its accurate result in second week. If a person is tested for typhoid in the first week, the viral test may not show the accurate result. Accurate results come in second week, right? So a person can be diagnosed for this typhoid through this viral test. Then is there any cure therapy for typhoid? Yes, typhoid is curable. Typhoid is curable. So a person should visit a doctor. A person should not go for self-medication. The person should go to a doctor, and doctor may prescribe some antibiotics against this typhoid. The most successful antibiotics against typhoid have been norfloxacin and ciprofloxacin. Ciprofloxacin and norfloxacin, they have proved to be very successful against the typhoid, right? So this typhoid is a curable disease. So prevention is always better than cure. So that is all about typhoid or the enteric fever. Why it is known as enteric fever? Because damage is caused to the intestine. Intestine is subject to lesions and perforations, and that damage to intestine causes the fever. That is why we call it as enteric fever. This was the only bacterial disease which we are supposed to discuss here. Now, after typhoid, we will discuss the viral disease. So, we will have a look at the viral disease AIDS. What is the full form of AIDS? Acquired immune deficiency syndrome. So, AIDS itself is not a disease. It is a manifestation. It is a collection of different syndromes which are caused due to malfunctioning of the immune system. So AIDS itself is not a disease. It is a syndrome. It is a group of symptoms of various different diseases, right? So what causes AIDS? What is its causative agent? This AIDS, it is caused by a virus known as HIV, human immunodeficiency virus. Human immunodeficiency virus. So AIDS is caused by a virus. That virus is known as human immunodeficiency virus. Then we will have a look at this mode of infection. Mode of infection. How this virus enters into our body. Mode of infection. This virus enters into the body of a person from an already infected person. So if a person goes for unprotected, unprotected sexual intercourse with an infected person, with an infected person, he is likely to get AIDS. So infection occurs from an infected person to a normal person through an unprotected sexual intercourse. Here a question arises. If a female is HIV positive and an uninfected male makes a sexual intercourse with her, is the male likely to get infected? So we have a case, suppose the male is HIV positive. Female is HIV positive, right? Male who has an unprotected sexual intercourse with this female is HIV negative. So when they go for sexual intercourse, Is male likely to get infected? First, let us see this. If the male is HIV positive, female is HIV negative. If they go for sexual intercourse, female will become HIV positive. Why female will become HIV positive? Because this male will introduce his semen into the body of female, and the virus is carried along with the semen. This virus, it is present in all body fluids of the infected person. So if the male is HIV positive and he makes an intercourse with a HIV negative female, and the intercourse is unprotected, that means the male is not using condom. So male, when inseminates the female, so male deposits semen inside the body of female. Along with the semen, the male is also depositing virus, and the female becomes HIV positive. Now, if the female is HIV positive, male is HIV negative, they go for the intercourse. Will the male become HIV positive? Yes, of course. Male will also become HIV positive. How the male will become HIV positive? Because at the time of sexual intercourse, when the sexual intercourse is unprotected, male is not using condom. Male inseminates the female. When the male ejaculates, he deposits his semen in the body of female. That semen does not contain virus. But you know this semen is ejaculated in the form of spurts, in the form of jets. So these jets are formed by the vigorous contraction and relaxation of the vas deferens and the muscles, right? So when male ejaculates, he develops a suction. He makes a suction movement, compression and suction. So when male ejaculates, he deposits his semen in the body of the female. But after ejaculation, some fluid from vagina of the female goes into the urethra of the male. Male sucks some fluid from the vagina of the female into his urethra, and it is from urethra the virus goes into the blood circulation of the male. So many people think that if the male is negative, female is positive, how the male is likely to get infected? So male is definitely going to be infected if he is not using a condom, because some vaginal fluids, they may go into the penile urethra, and from penile urethra they go into the blood circulation of the male, and the male too becomes HIV positive, right? So it doesn't matter whether the male is positive or the female is positive. If any one of them is positive, they make an unprotected sexual intercourse. Definitely, the uninfected person is likely to get infected, right? So this disease spreads from one person to another person, from an infected person to a normal person, through unprotected sexual intercourse, right? In addition to this unprotected sexual intercourse, the disease also spreads from an infected person to a normal person through unchecked, through unchecked blood transfusion, blood transfusion, through unchecked organ transplantation, through unchecked artificial insemination. So in addition to unprotected sexual intercourse, AIDS may spread from an infected person to a normal person through unchecked blood transfusion. So whenever a person requires a blood transfusion, it must be made sure that the blood which is being given, which is to be given to him, is HIV negative. If the blood was donated by an HIV positive person, that means the viruses are present in that blood. And if a person is given that blood without screening, the recipient will also get infected, right? So unchecked blood transfusion, that may also spread AIDS from an infected person to a normal person. Unchecked organ transplantation. An HIV positive person should not donate his organs for transplantation to a normal person. Because, as I told you, the virus is present in all body fluids. These organs, which are taken from an HIV positive person, they contain some interstitial fluids. They may contain some lymph in them, or they may contain some blood in them. So, when these organs are transplanted into a normal person, the virus may be also transplanted along with those organs, right? And it may spread from an infected person to a normal person through artificial insemination. Many females who suffer from infertility, they resort to artificial insemination. So in artificial insemination, semen from a donor is introduced into their body by artificial method. If the semen was donated by an HIV positive person, and this infected semen is artificially given to an uninfected person, the recipient is likely to get infected, right? So artificial insemination, it may also spread the AIDS if the semen is not screened properly. So before blood transfusion, before organ transplantation, before artificial insemination, it must be ensured that blood or organ or semen is from an HIV negative person. Nowadays, it has been made mandatory for all blood banks to check whether the blood they have collected is from an HIV negative person. And this blood packet must be marked with HIV negative stamp. If anyone of us requires blood, so when we get this blood from the blood bank, we should check whether the blood is from HIV negative person or not, whether the blood packet is marked with HIV negative seal or not, right? So this is another method by which this virus may spread from an infected person to a normal person. The virus may spread from infected person to a normal person by deep oral kissing. By deep oral kissing. If a person is infected and another person makes deep oral kisses with him, there is exchange of saliva in deep oral kissing. Superficial kissing doesn't spread the disease. However, if there is deep oral kissing, in deep oral kissing, there is exchange of saliva. And this exchange of saliva, it may also transfer the virus from the infected person to a normal person, right? It is also spread from an infected person to a normal person by sharing of hypodermic needles and syringes. This is the most common method of spread of this AIDS in drug addicts. Drug addicts, they sit in a group and they share the syringe for injecting these drugs. They share the syringe and needle for injecting drug into their blood. So if one of them is HIV positive, so when he makes an injection to his body, he injects the drug. As he leaves the syringe, this rubber which is attached to the handle of that syringe, that is flexible, so it moves a little bit behind. The syringe is withdrawn a little bit behind, and this sucks some fluid into the needle or into the syringe. Or due to capillary action, some fluid may rise into the needle, right? So if a needle and syringe was used on an HIV positive person, when he injects the drug, then he removes the syringe. As he removes the syringe, some of his body fluids may remain in the needle of the syringe. And when this same syringe is used by another person who is normal for injecting drug into his body, those viruses which were present in that fluid, they may enter into his body, right? So in this way, sharing of hypodermic needles and syringes may also spread the disease from an infected person to a normal person, right? The disease may be spread from an infected mother to his offspring, to his baby. How? A mother may also infect his baby or her baby, sorry. If the mother is HIV positive, mother is HIV positive and she is pregnant. During the course of pregnancy, the fetus remains safe. The fetus does not suffer from HIV infection. When the fetus is inside the womb of the HIV positive mother, the fetus is safe. Virus does not transfer through placenta. Virus is not transferred through placenta. But at the time of parturition, parturition means childbirth. When the placenta breaks, when the placenta breaks, there is mixing of fetal and maternal blood. So at this time, when the maternal blood mixes with the fetal blood, at this time the virus is transmitted from mother's blood to fetal blood, and the fetus may become infected. And at the time of lactation, a mother is also feeding his infant with viruses because this virus is present in breast milk. I told you that this virus is present in all body fluids. So at the time of lactation, when the mother is feeding her infant, she is giving milk to her, but unknowingly she is also giving these viruses to her infant, right? So this is how this virus spreads from an infected person to an uninfected person, right? Sorry. This is its mode of infection, right? So how we can prevent ourselves from contacting this AIDS? Most of the AIDS infections spreads at prostitution centers. The hub of AIDS is prostitution centers. So if we have to save ourselves from contacting this AIDS, so how can we save ourselves from contacting this AIDS? The trick is simple. We have discussed how the AIDS spreads from an infected person to an uninfected person. We have to avoid all these things so that we don't get the virus.